Hello everyone, in this video I'll be breaking down all the spell and cantrip changes in the 2024 spell updates mod made by MobTalon here, which updates all the spells in the game to closely resemble their Players Handbook 2024 edition. So there's many changes throughout all the different types of spells we have in the game. It actually has some compatibility with the Sword Coast Cantrips for 2024 spell updates mod, as well as the 2024 Fighter Update mod, also made by MobTalon here, which adds more spells to the Eldritch Knight spell list. And diving right in with the cantrip changes. Now first, we have Acid Splash now is a evocation spell, which means that it benefits from sculpting spells of the evocation wizard. Blade Ward was updated to now give a 1d4 bonus to, or 1d4 negative to the enemy's attack roll, and it requires a concentration in the last 10 turns instead of giving you damage resistances. Booming Blade got hit with a pretty heavy nerf because now it does not stack with the extra attack. However, it'll scale like normal on levels 5 and 10, which it didn't in the normal game. And oddly enough, the damage tag didn't have Thunder applied, and it now does. Now, Bone Chill has been changed over to Chill Touch, which increases its damage to a 1d10 of necrotic damage, and it removes the disadvantage on attack rolls for the undead. It's now a melee spell, but it does more damage, and it can now be used with the Warcaster feat alongside like Shocking Grasp. Dancing Lights is now an illusion spell, which isn't really a major change, but the Friend's cantrip now forces a Wisdom save. It also makes it so that enemies will not become permanently hostile towards your character. It reduces the range from 30 feet to 10 feet now, and it can no longer be used in combat. One of my favorite changes is Mage Hand no longer has a cooldown, so you can use this a lot more frequently. Now, Poison Spray got its range increased to 30 feet. It's now no longer a Constitution saving throw, which is really easy for the enemies to resist. And it's now a spell attack roll. It's now a Necromancy cantrip, which means that the Death Domain Cleric can now use it as one of its Reaper cantrips, which can attack 2 targets at a time. And we also got a change to Shocking Grasp, which removed the advantage on metallic surfaces. And quite possibly the largest change is True Strike, which now makes it so that you can just do an attack with your spellcasting ability modifier, and you can also choose if you want to have that damage be radiant damage instead of just the normal damage type that it was going to deal. And this will also properly apply weapon enchantments. It'll also apply on sneak attacks too. Just make sure that you have the sneak attack reaction enabled whenever you do this attack. And it's an option too for Warcaster. Produce Flame got a cool change, which now it's a bonus action to summon the fire, and you can throw it as many times as you want. I also really like this spell. It creates a little light source for you, which is super useful. Resistance also got a really useful change, which it makes a target more resistance to a certain damage type. It'll receive a 1d4 damage reduction against whatever elemental damage type that you choose there. I think it looks cool with all the colors. And Shillelagh or Shillelagh, depending on your pronunciation, now will do either bludgeoning or force damage. So that's a cool change because force damage is not often resisted. And the final cantrip change is the Vicious Mockery, which now does 1d6 and it'll scale up to 2d and 3d6 at level 10. As for level 1 spells, Armor of Agathis now is a bonus action to apply. Also, the Absorb Elements, which is on the 2 elemental capes, this now properly will refresh on short rest, which it was broken. It didn't do that naturally in the base game. Animal Friendship got a change so that it no longer requires the target to have lower than 4 intelligence, but one of the most interesting level 1 changes is to Chromatic Orb. This now fixes it so that when we use this spell, we can change, or any of the spell's damage type will now match the Thunder one, and it can chain around to multiple enemies. So you can see now, it is at the 3d8 at level 1, and it can possibly bounce onto an extra target on impact. I think this is really fun. Depending on the level, it has a 35% chance at level 1 spell slot, level 2 gives it 60, level 3 gives it 80, level 4 gives it 90, level 5 gives it 95, and a guaranteed bounce at level 6. Pretty cool stuff if you want to sling an orb around and have it potentially bounce to another target. We got a nice crit off there. Sorry, Karlach. I guess I'll throw a fire one at you to kind of heal you back up. Hopefully it bounces. We'll try that again. Oh, see, it might not need to be in combat for it to actually bounce. Color Spray got a pretty big change now, affecting a cone, and it'll have a potential to put the enemy blind. And this is for 2 turns, actually making it a pretty useful spell. And on top of this, illusion spells can be used with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, making it actually pretty effective if you're going to use base game items. Cure Wounds actually got a separate mod for this change, but it now does a 2d8 of healing, which is so much better than just the single 1d8 that it normally had. And on top of this, it'll upscale a little bit better, and it is now an Abjuration spell instead of Evocation. And every spell slot that you upscale it with gives you an additional 2d8, so it's actually somewhat of a good spell now. Now, one of the changes in the Players Handbook 2024 that has a lot of people sad is the change to Divine Smite. Obviously, the Paladin being one of the most powerful characters in the game because this is a useful ability. This now will eat up your bonus action and your action, and it has a verbal component, so you can get silence and screw that up. So, yeah, it's a little bit tricky, but it does get scaling up to the spell slot level 6, so if you want 10 levels of the Bard, 2 levels of the Paladin, you can still put out some pretty crazy damage. And if you're playing a high half elf or high elf, you get Booming Blade too. So that can help you kind of balance it out. Although Booming Blade doesn't work with the extra attack now, so you got to make some choices. Dissonant Whispers now makes an enemy run away from you, and it kind of functions like the flee ability from command. So that's pretty cool instead of making them frightened, which makes them not move. False Life will now give you 10 health points, and then the Fiendish Invocation will give you 12, which is from the Warlock. Healing Word also got the change here, now being a 2d4, and it scales up in 2d4. And on top of that, it's also Abjuration, similar to the Healing Cure Wound spell. Inflict Wounds is now a Constitution saving throw instead of an attack roll, and on top of this, it now does 2d10 of necrotic damage instead. The Ray of Sickness spell will now poison the target on hit, and rather than forcing a saving throw, so this is kind of a nice change. I also want to mention too that all these spells will be on the enemies that you fight too. Now, also, we got to change the protection from evil and good. So protect an enemy ally. So this no longer makes you globally immune to the frighting condition, only protecting you from the promised creature types. Now actually makes you immune to charms from the said creature types. So yeah, just a rework to make it function properly. Sleep is now a 2-meter radius effect, so you can blow that up in an area around your character, and enemies who failed a saving throw are incapacitated for a turn, and falling asleep for 9 turns, they fail another wisdom saving throw at the end of their turn. Added concentration, so that does make things a little bit more tricky, but I think this is a good change. Both the color spray and sleep spells got some pretty nice buffs here. Tasha's Hideous Laughter now gets upcast ability, so you can target multiple targets with it. Witch Bolt now does a 2d12 of damage. Now, Witch Bolt is pretty bad. And whenever you recast it, it'll still do the 1d12. So yeah, not that crazy change, but it's something. Now, Searing Smite did get a cool change. It no longer will take your concentration. It still uses the bonus action here, and it adds scaling for the ongoing damage effect. So if you upcast it, Paladins can also use this on critical hit if they wanted to, and this also applies to their other smite types as well. Thunderous Smite got a change to now have upcasting, and it fixed a bug that added fall damage when it was used to throw enemies. They can also cast this one as a critical hit, and Wrathful Smite now doing necrotic damage. So this is no longer with the concentration. It'll have more damage whenever you upcast it, and increase the frightened duration to 10 turns. Up from the 2, but the targets can now do a wisdom save on every single turn. This is also a necromancy spell at this point, and changed from evocation. Paladins can cast this on critical hit. And Snaring Strike got a change to no longer cost, it'll now only cost a level 4 spell slot whenever you hit a target. There's a change to Hail of Thorns as well that now gives the weapon function on all levels hit. It's now an attack, so this benefits from extra attack and now only consumes the bonus action and spell slot on a hit, which means the spell only has effects on hit. So if you miss, you don't lose your bonus action or the spell slot, which is kind of a nice change because this is normally a choice that's not that great because then you can't do the extra attack, which now you can. There's also a change to Good Berry to now do a 4d4 healing, increasing the amount of healing per berry, and actually change the spell to Conjuration too. Another cool change is the Hunter's Mark will change the damage type to Force rather than the weapon's damage type, and also work on any type of attack roll, be it from an attack from your fists or a spell attack. So that's kind of cool because you can now use it with things like the Scorching Ray spell. I did mention it, but there's the change to the Animal Friendship so that they don't have to have that intelligence requirement. Blindness got a pretty cool change, which now has a 27-meter radius, so it's literally adding like 50% more radius to it, and it's now a transmutation spell instead of necromancy spell. Branding Smite got a change to Shining Smite, which will now give you advantage if you attack a target and then attack them afterwards. There's also a change to Cloud of Daggers, which can be moved with a action, which is considered a magic action, similar to Moonbeam. Now deals damage at the end of an enemy's turn rather at the start of their turn. So that is a pretty big change. Cloud of Daggers is nice because it is guaranteed damage, so that's something to keep in mind there. So targets that start their turn there won't get hit by it. It's kind of a weird change, but it's how it works in Players Handbook 2024. Dark Vision now matches a superior Dark Vision ability, so that's great. Enhance ability no longer gives you the extra effects if you're playing as a cleric, so you just give the bonuses to the abilities. Now, a cool change to Enlarge and Reduce is that Enlarge will now actually stack with the Baldur and Giant Slayer, which previously didn't. I actually did a whole video on this, how to get as large as possible. The answer is the Elixir of the Colossus. Now you combine all of them together to make yourself huge and get that extra damage on your attacks. Flame Blade got a change to it, so it's no longer a concentration. You get it until long rest, and it acts as if it were Shadow Blade as well, and it changed the base damage to 1d6 with the finesse property. Flaming Spear also got a change, which now its ram attack will always scale with the wisdom, and it'll use the preferred spellcasting ability. Same changes to its Fiery Aura ability. The saving throw will now match the caster's spellcasting modifier, which it previously did not, instead of wisdom, which obviously didn't work if you're playing as like a wizard or something. It'll now add 6 health points to the sphere per level, the spell slot above its first level, so you can upcast it for some extra health. Magical weapon no longer requires a concentration. This is a very nice change, and it's a bonus action, which gives you that one bonus to attack and damage. The wizard doesn't get access to it, but Moonbeam will now work with the spell sculpting for the Evocation Wizard. Phantasmal Force is now up from 1d6 to a 2d8, so it's actually quite a big buff to its damage because this spell there's no reason to ever use it. Raven Feeblement got a huge rework, as this now will give it so that the enemy will get their damage reduced by a 1d8 instead of getting reduced of the strength damage. They also get disadvantage on all strength checks, and they also will have disadvantage on their next attack if they succeed on the save. So even if you do cast this, there's going to be some benefit to you. Prayer of Healing got a massive change because now it previously was never something you should really use because it just sucks so bad. This now gives the benefits of a short rest. So this is great if you got if you have a full Coffee Lock Warlock team. That's amazing. Lesser Restoration now is only a bonus action to use, and Spiritual Weapon can be upcast, which will add additional 1d8 damage and 8 health points per level. This now requires a concentration, though. When cast from the Sethin Great Axe or the Harper Sacred Striker, which both cast a spell at level 6, they will benefit from the upcast. So this is great. The Sethin Axe is also a JoJo's Bizarre reference. So if you like that anime, check out the Sethin Axe. It's actually a really cool axe in the base game, which lets you enlarge, reduce, and also it gives you a summon at level 6 of a Great Axe. And the saving throws on their weapon abilities will now match your spellcasting ability modifier, which is great because this now makes it worth using. The Maul is still my favorite, with the Maul giving disadvantage on wisdom saves, so you can hit commands and hold persons more freely. Animate Dead gets a really nice change. The skeleton now gets a short sword, so it can benefit if you play an Oathbreaker Knight and use the Aura of Hate, which previously did not work. This also increased their Constitution to 15 from 8, their armor class to 11 from 8, and the HP is now 20 instead of 19. They also get Dark Vision passives. The zombies will also get Dark Vision as well, can be targeted by healing spells, and will get benefits from short rest. These are now also applied to the ghouls and the flying ghouls as well. Bestow Curse now will no longer require a concentration if you cast at level 5 or 6. It's kind of a cool change, actually. Blinding Smite can now be upcast and will blind on hit rather than forcing a saving throw, and they can also cast that as a critical hit. That's for the Paladin. Mass Healing Word will now do a 2d4 of healing at level 1, but it doesn't receive the changes to upcasting like the other ones, and I think that's fair. Blink will no longer break your concentrations, which is an interesting change. The spell is not always the one that you want to use. There's also the mechanics behind the scenes that were changed that doesn't impact the gameplay. Now, Counterspell actually got hit with a nerf, and this is interesting. So it's reworked to now have a Constitution saving throw on the target. On a failed save, the spell dissipates on the, this now will properly use a caster's spellcasting stat and no longer auto-succeeds against the same or lower leveled spell. If a spell slot was being used before being counterspelled, it is refunded now. So some pretty big changes to counterspell, which I think is kind of cool because this is something that's almost like meta-defining. You almost have to have counterspell. It's still good, obviously, but they did nerf it in certain ways. That's just the Players Handbook 2024. I think it's a pretty interesting change. Crusader's Mantle from the Paladin will now apply to unarmed punches, which is kind of cool. The gaseous form here can be upcast to target more creatures. Hunger Vidar will have a fixed area saving throw when the turn's ending, not scaling with the caster spellcasting ability modifier. Added upcasting to Hunger Vidar, which is huge, which will then increase the damage by a 1d6. Alternatively, 1d6 cold at levels 4 and 6, and 1d6 acid at level 5. And Lightning Arrow for the Ranger is now coded as an attack roll. This is actually a huge change as well because they can then use it with extra attack. So you can do a Lightning Arrow, then an attack. No longer forces a save on the main target, deciding damage on whether it hits or misses. So yeah, you hit a target, the ones around it will get hit with the damage as well. Now costs a bonus action to use, however. So it is actually a pretty nice change because yes, you want to use it, but you can only use it once per turn unless you multi-class into the Rogue Thief for 2 bonus actions. I think that's a cool change. Sleet Storm now will make it so that the target has to do a dexterity save instead of constitution save to be able to maintain their concentration. So I think across the board, this makes it a little bit maybe harder to land. Slow had a bug that let you target multiple times if you upcast it at level 4, so that's now fixed with this. And we also got to change the Stinking Cloud so that this prevents the usage of bonus actions as well as actions. So actually a pretty huge change. I think it's an underrated spell for sure. And Warden of Vitality is now Aura of Vitality, no longer requires the bonus action to heal. So you can only heal once per turn with this, but you don't eat up your bonus action when using that. And it's from the Cleric use. Banishment got changed, so it's now a increased duration for 3 turns, up from 2. It still says 2 on the tooltip, just a heads up, it is 3 now. And it decreases the range from 18 meters to 9 meters. I think this is a cool change, just updated to Player's Handbook, obviously. Blight also gets a change, so undead and constructs are no longer immune to Blight. Plant creatures will automatically fail the saving throw, taking the maximum damage always. So that's a kind of cool change. Now, I just want to note, you don't fight that many plants by the time you get access to this spell, but this still, I think, a pretty good change. Dimension Door now gets it so that whenever you use this, you're no longer restricted to the medium or smaller creatures when selecting an ally, so you can now have your giant barbarian come through with you. Freedom of movement had a change that it can now be cast on multiple allies, so that's great for the cleric. Grasping Vine also got a change, so it does 48 bludgeoning damage on hit. This is a druid spell that's a bonus action to use. Its health also got increased to 44 and gets 8 extra health per level upcast, but it requires concentration. That is from the druid spell list. One of my favorite spells in the game, I love it. Ice Storm gets it buff, actually, so it now increases the bludgeoning damage from 2d8 to a 2d10. This also scales up whenever you upcast it, now doing a 1d10 extra damage per spell slot used. Staggering Smite, which was added in patch 8 to the Warlock, and Hexblade Warlock, I should say, is now added with upcasted for extra damage. Instead of staggering, it now applies a stun. So that's actually a crazy buff. I removed the concentration. I don't have it here because it's on the Warlock, but this is now an invocation spell, and when level 20 compatibility is added, Paladins can cast this as well if they get the access to that spell. So yeah, Staggering Smite for the Warlock is nuts now because stuns basically makes the enemy skip their turn. And Stone Skin now will work against magical piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning resistances. Previously, there was no reason to use this. Cloud Kill is now fixed so that it's whenever you upcast, you get extra damage. I also want to mention that Cloud Kill is kind of an underrated spell. If you got a cleric that has Hero's Feast, it makes you immune to the poisoned condition. Oddly enough, also makes you immune to Cloud Kill's poison damage. So you can have your whole team camp out in the Cloud Kill, and then the enemies have to hurt themselves to actually get to your characters. Kind of a cool mix if you wanted to use this spell. Now, the cleric actually got a lot of other level 5 spell slots changed as well with Contagion. So this now has it so it's no longer a melee spell attack. It forces a Constitution saving throw to deal 11d8 of necrotic damage. And yeah, the rest of it is left unchanged. That's pretty nuts. Now, Contagion is an interesting spell because you can cast this outside of combat. It won't aggro the targets. It obviously will now with it dealing some damage, but that's kind of a cool change. On top of this, the Danse Macabre, if you got that item, or from the Necromancy of Thea, it's a spell that you can cast. The ghouls will now be targeted by healing spells and will benefit from short rest. So again, just nice change there. Destructive Wave, which I don't have because I played a Death Cleric right here. So Destructive Wave will now have their damage flag set to Thunder. They previously weren't set to Thunder, so that's a nice change, making it work properly. The Mass Cure Wounds has increased the heal from 3d8 to 5d8. Scaling has not changed on this spell, but it's now an Abjuration instead of Evocation spell. And Banishing Smite, which is accessible to the Bard level 10, and if you go really high, or I guess the Hexblade Warlock as well, it's now a Conjuration spell instead of Abjuration. If you upcast it at a level 6 spell slot with the Bard, it'll now cost a proper spell slot of level 6 instead of level 5. It removed the ranged option from this, increased the banish duration to 4 turns on Banishing Smite, and when level 20 compatibility is added, if you have a Paladin, they get access to this as well. The Cleric, again, has a lot of spells here that are impacted, so their Blade Barrier spell now has a saving throw that is matched with your spellcasting ability modifier. Damage type is now force damage, up from piercing, which is cool because it's red. I like the red. It kind of makes me think it's like bleed damage, kind of sweet. Also, the Create Undead spell, Mummy, can now be targeted by healing spells and gets the benefits from a short rest. Heal is now an Abjuration spell instead of Evocation. Circle of Death got an interesting change. It's now an 8d8 of damage instead of 8d6, and you can cast it wherever you want. You don't have to target a person. You can actually set it on the ground. So sometimes you can now actually hit more enemies with this, which I think is a really great change. Eye Bite was changed that the Sicken now applies the same effects as Poison, no longer forces the saves in the middle of the effect, which removes it. Odaluk's Freezing Sphere, one of my favorite spells in the game, increased area damage and freeze area to 30 feet. Tabletop is 60 feet radius. I feel like they said they should scale this back because obviously a 60-foot radius is massive. So I can make it much more. There's also a change that you can actually make a pocketable version of it and throw it for free. And then this is now changed so that you can't be silenced because previously you could do it while you're silenced. So that's actually it's a nice change. I like the change to the area effect. It's actually probably my favorite spell in the game. I love using this. Otto's Irresistible Dance has now been changed to force a wisdom saving throw on cast. That's a pretty big change because previously the Irresistible Dance, actually previously at the start when this game was originally released, Otto's Irresistible Dance you could not resist. It was 10 turns. The enemy you could just take over Raphael really easily. Now in the current version of Baldur's Gate 3 without this mod, the target will always dance on that first turn. Now this changes so they can potentially save on it on the first turn, so it's no longer going to be fully irresistible. There's also some changes to Wall of Ice. So this now does the fixed area saving throw, not scaling with the caster's spellcasting ability modifier, which will now do properly. And this is actually a really high damaging spell. They also fixed this in patch 8, making it pretty useful. Also, I guess the last spell here is Wall of Thorns on the Druid and The damage type is now changed to slashing, and no other really changes here. Fixed area saving throw, not casting with the spellcasting ability modifier, somewhat similar to Wall of Ice, and it'll now match your spellcasting ability modifier to land those hits a bit more easily. And some other changes is the 9th level spell. If you play Dark Urge, you get Power Word Kill. It can now be used on targets above 100% health, and will deal a 12d12 of psychic damage to an enemy that has more than that. Guidance, these are spells that they won't make updates to. Guidance would be really clunky if they changed it to the way that works in 2024 Player Handbook. Heroes Feast, I'm glad they didn't make the change here. I've referenced Heroes Feast a couple times in this video. I love this spell. It would make it so that it gives you poison resistance instead of the wisdom saving throw advantage, which is actually a huge buff. And it would actually nerf it quite hard if they made the change to poison resistance. They also mentioned they did this because it makes protection from poison a useless spell at that point. And also, they're not going to change the conjure like elemental spells because Baldur's Gate 3 has their own identity with how these work because they don't require concentration, which they do in the tabletop 5th edition version. So yeah, they're not going to make changes to that because it ruins the fun element in my opinion. I also want to thank Ridiac here who made the Sword Coast Cantrip spell mod, as well as Joom there for pointing them in the right direction for making this mod. Incredible mod. I just wanted to break this down as I had a few people asking about this, and I wanted to talk about all the different changes because I think it's a really nice change. If you want to play with the updated spell list, if you're a D&D fan, definitely worth checking out this mod. If you enjoyed it, check it out, download it, and I hope you have a great day. We'll catch you all in the next video.